Good morning, good morning. All right, here we are, the Book of Jasher. We are in chapter 75. Oh, no, I think actually we're on 76. Yeah, because in the last reading, Moses became king of Cush. Like he ran away from Egypt when he was 18 after slaying the Egyptian. In this one, the Egyptian was really doing horrific things. In the Genesis account, he was still just bad, but definitely not as bad as in the Book of Jasher. In the meantime, he went and we got wars between the different tribes, and the king that had gone out and defeated an enemy was coming back to his hometown. The hometown rejected him because of the wicked priests, Balaam. I'm wondering if it's related to the name Baal, because it's B-L-A, B-A-L-A-A-M. So Balaam. So very similar to Baal, but not exactly. You know, it's like the difference between Steve and Smith. There's subtleties. It's not perfect, but anyway. The idea is that because of the returning army not being able to go to their homes, the king had passed because they were waiting for 9 years. They choose Moses to be their leader. He takes a year to have everyone raise a stork, and they use the storks to defeat the snakes that were on one of the corners. Then they come in and defeat the men of the city that had kept them out, so now they could go home. So huzzah. Then there was a contingency of the children of Ephraim that decided, well, the time must be up. But it wasn't. And so when they went out, they didn't carry any provisions. They were going to take some people's cattle, and they called for backup, and backup arrived, and they were slaughtered. All right. So, chapter 76. And Moses the son of Amram was still king in the land of Cush in those days, and he prospered in his kingdom, and he conducted the government of the children of Cush in justice, righteousness, and integrity. And all the children of Cush loved Moses all the days that he reigned over them, and all the inhabitants of the land of Cush were greatly afraid of him. And in the 40th year of the reign of Moses over Cush, Moses was sitting on the royal throne, whilst Adoniah, the queen, was before him, and all the nobles were sitting around him. Now remember, Adoniah was the former king's wife. She was given to him, but he's like, yeah, I'm not gonna even look at her because she's not like acceptable to my ancestors. I would use the term she's not in the covenant, but that doesn't exactly apply here. But it comes from the same background, the same idea of you want to marry someone who is of the same ideological background. So now Adoniah was before him, and all the nobles were sitting around him. And Adoniah, the queen, said before the king and the princes, "What is this thing which you, the children of Cush, have done for this long time? Surely you know that for 40 years that this man has reigned over Cush. He has not approached me, nor has he served the gods of the children of Cush." See? "Now therefore hear, O children of Cush, and let this man no more reign over you, as he is not of our flesh. Behold, Menacrus, my son, is grown up. Let him reign over you, for it is better for you to serve the son of your Lord than serve a stranger, a slave of the king of Egypt." He was of the tribe of Levi, but that's splitting hairs. And all the people and nobles of the children of Cush heard the words which Adoniah, the queen, had spoken in their ears, and all the people were preparing until the evening and the morning. They rose up early and made Menarchus, son of Kikanus, king over them. And the children of Cush were afraid to stretch forth their hand against Moses, for the Lord was with Moses. And the children of Cush remembered the oath which they swore unto Moses. Therefore they did him no harm. They did no harm to him. But the children of Cush gave many presents to Moses and sent him from them with great honor. Yeah, that's decent and smart. He delivered the city back to them. So Moses went forth. So I was wondering how this would happen. It actually makes sense in this case. So Moses went forth from the land of Cush and went home and ceased to reign over Cush. And Moses was 66 years old when he went out of the land of Cush, for the thing was from the Lord. For the period had arrived which he had appointed in the days of old to bring forth Israel from the affliction of the children of Ham. So Moses went to Midian, for he was afraid to return to Egypt on account of Pharaoh. And he went and sat at a well of water in Midian. And this is where Genesis picks up again. And 7 daughters of Reuel the Midianite went out to feed their father's flock. And they came to the well and drew water to water their father's flock. So the shepherds of Midian came and drove them away. And Moses rose up and helped them and watered the flock. And they came home to their father Reuel. I'm trying to figure this out. I thought Jethro was his father-in-law. Wait a minute. So, because, okay, I'm kind of confused here, because I remember in Exodus that, come on, changing from Genesis, Old Testament to Exodus, we're probably, chapter 3 here? Nope, that's Moses in the burning bush, so it's chapter 2. When Reuel, their father, said, "How is it that you've come?" Okay, yeah. But yet, Exodus 3:1, Jethro is his father-in-law. Why the change of name? I'm really weirded out by this. Sorry, I didn't know I had the corner in there. No. Anyway, why is the name Reuel when later he's called Jethro? All right, let me see if there's an explanation. Why is there the name Reuel? So R-U, Reuel. When later he is called Jethro. Okay, so I'm not the first person with this, thankfully. Same person, different designations. Most scholars and traditional commentaries identify Reuel and Jethro as the same individual. Reuel, Hebrew for friend of God, is often viewed as his personal or clan name. Jethro, Hebrew for excellence or superiority, is widely considered the title of respect, an honorific epithet, rather than a birth name. This follows a common ancient Near Eastern practice where individuals were known by both a personal name and a title, reflecting their status or role, similar to how Jacob was also called Israel. Okay, sure. So, good to know. So, Reuel, or friend of God, would be the personal name, which is interesting. That's really interesting. Okay. Sorry, I'm thinking about how Abraham was considered to be a friend of God. And I'm wondering how, who we normally know as Jethro came by that name. It could have just been his designation, just like if you call somebody by their name Hunter, it doesn't actually make them someone who goes out and hunts animals. It's just their name. So it's Reuel. Okay. That's very interesting. All right, so let's continue. So he fed the flock, and Reuel said to his daughters, "And where is he? Where have you left the man?" And Reuel sent for him, and fetched him, and brought him home, and he ate bread with him. And Moses related to Reuel that he had fled from Egypt, and that he had reigned 40 years over Cush, and that they afterwards had taken the government from him, and had sent him away in peace with honor and with presents. And when Reuel heard the words of Moses, Reuel said within himself, "I will put this man into the prison house, whereby I shall consolate the children of Cush, for he has fled from them." What? Well, that's way different from Genesis. And they took and put him into the prison house, and Moses was in prison 10 years. And whilst Moses was in the prison house, Zipporah, the daughter of Reuel, took pity over him, and supported him with bread and water all the time. And all the children of Israel were yet in the land of Egypt, serving the Egyptians in all manner of hard work, and then the hand of Egypt continued in severity over the children of Israel in those days. Okay, this is way, way different. Like, I'm staggeringly different. Because it's just, he delivered them, watered the flocks. He said unto his daughters, "Where is he that call him that he may eat bread?" So it shows the gratitude. And he gave Moses Zipporah his daughter, and that's it. Nothing about him being in prison. Why would this story have Moses being in prison? I mean, unless it's some sort of mirror allegory of Joseph, that's the only thing I can think of, is that in modern day writing, we have a very set standard of how to tell stories, because that way it makes it riveting, and that gives the clicks or the views or the etc. And people will like your story. And sure, it can be bog standard and whatever else. And my sister absolutely abhors following that to the T, because that's what everyone does, because it works. But then it's become so standard that we have no enjoyment or depth of storytelling or difference in storytelling, other than what is being slopped out on our media plates nowadays, that is just horrific because it has no structure. They're like, "Oh, I'm subverting expectations." No, you're creating crap. Anyway, so to me, this is very reminiscent of stories that, okay, so I'm used to the idea of chiasmus, the idea that you go A, B, C, D, C, B, A, right? And if that's happening, and they're doing it in a literary way, if they went into Egypt with Joseph being in prison, then they're going to be brought out of Egypt with Moses being in prison. I'm wondering if that's what they're doing. And that also makes me wonder if that's why, in the story of Abraham was thrown into a fiery furnace. Because for them, their most recent thing was the captivity in Babylon. Because the only fiery furnace that I know from Genesis, well, not Genesis, but from the Bible, specifically the Bible, is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which is Daniel, right? And so I'm wondering if that's what they're doing, is that they're revisiting these stories in a time when they're coming back from Babylon, or have had the story of Daniel and his experiences, and so they are mirroring things to say, see, we share these things in common. I don't know. Because it just seems really strange. Oh, well, in this Genesis version, and you can see it reflected in the movies Ten Commandments and Prince of Egypt that the daughters of Reuel, or Jethro, were being driven off by the Midianites, and Moses saves them from them. Yeah, and an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us to water the flocks. So not only did he defend them, but he also watered them, which is a pretty big deal. You notice that there's a lot of things that occur when you go out watering people's flocks for them. So he's like, oh, this guy's run away, let's put him in prison? Seems really weird to me. Obviously, it's because it's new. It's very different from the Genesis account. All right, but let's keep going. So Zipporah took pity on him. All the children of Israel were yet in the land of Egypt, serving the Egyptians in all manner of hard work. And the hand of Egypt continued in severity over the children of Israel in those days. So Moses was in there 10 years. Something tells me it's going to be another 2 years. Unless he relies only on the Lord. Unlike Joseph, apparently. Okay. At that time the Lord smote Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he afflicted him with the plague of leprosy from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, owing to the cruel treatment of the children of Israel. Was this plague at the time from the Lord upon Pharaoh, king of Egypt. For the Lord had hearkened to the prayer of his people and the children of Israel, and their cry reached him on account of their hard work. Still his anger did not turn from them, and the hand of Pharaoh was still stretched out against the children of Israel. And Pharaoh hardened his neck before the Lord, and he increased his yoke over the children of Israel, and embittered their lives with all manner of hard work. And when the Lord had inflicted the plague upon Pharaoh, king of Egypt, he asked his wise men and sorcerers to cure him. And his wise men and sorcerers said unto him that if the blood of the little children were put into the wounds, he would be healed. Okay, I have a lot to say about that. This is a persistent thing that you see in apocryphal and Old Testament kind of stuff. That the blood of children does stuff. I'm also horrified because we have a modern day version of this. We have a modern day, we could use fetal stem cells. Where stem cell research actually has had progress using adult stem cells. But fetal stem cells were just the promise and the rage for a long time simply because of all the potential that they had. Now, at the same time, my information that I have is pretty darn old at this point. Probably 10, maybe 20 years. Because, we did reports on this stuff back in college. And so, but it was horrific then, and it's horrific now. It's basically used as a justification for abortion. And you see this constantly. There are other works, I'm sure, besides this that talk about this, and you have this other kind of stuff of, bathing in the blood of virgins and whatever else from vampires and stuff. So you can see it's a persistent thing. So, and look at old fairy tales. There's a lot that strum on that note, that the blood, which is the vitality of life, from someone who's young will help heal and cure things. So it might be more a general universalist thing. Don't hit the kitty. Don't hit the iPad. Just relax there. All right. So yeah, I'm disturbed yet not surprised. And Pharaoh hearkened to them and sent his ministers to Goshen to the children of Israel to take their little children. Yeesh. I think, again, I can tell the Book of Jasher is sensationalized. So this could also be sensationalization against Pharaoh, because we don't have it in Genesis like that. So, I'm sorry, the kitty's just right behind where the camera is. So, and she's threatening to rub her face all over it and knock it down. So, and the Pharaoh's ministers went and took the infants of the children of Israel from the bosoms of their mothers by force. And they brought them to Pharaoh daily, a child each day. And the physicians killed them and applied them to the plague. Thus they did all the days. And the number of the children which Pharaoh slew was 375. So for over a year he was doing this. But the Lord hearkened not to the physicians of the king of Egypt, and the plague went on increasing mightily. Well, with a modern medical perspective, we know how leprosy works, and that would not be the cure. And Pharaoh was 10 years afflicted with the plague. Still, the heart of Pharaoh was more hardened against the children of Israel. Dang it, their blood isn't working. I don't know why. And at the end of 10 years, the Lord continued to afflict Pharaoh with destructive plagues. And the Lord smote him with a bad tumor and a sickness at the stomach, and that plague turned into a severe boil. And at the time the 2 ministers of Pharaoh came from the land of Goshen, where all the children of Israel were, and went to the house of Pharaoh and said to him, We have seen the children of Israel slacken in their work and neglect in their labor. And when Pharaoh heard the words of his ministers, his anger was kindled against the children of Israel exceedingly, for he was greatly grieved at his bodily pain. And he answered and said, Now that the children of Israel know that I am ill, they turn and scoff at us. Now therefore harness my chariot for me, and I will betake myself to Goshen, and I will see the scoff of the children of Israel, with which they are deriding me. So his servants harnessed the chariot for him, and they took and made it. Sorry, I'm envisioning a guy who is like wrapped in bandages, as if he's already half mummified. And it's interesting. Anyway, that's my envisioning of it. Just, and very sick and ill in all sorts of ways. So, and they took and made him ride upon the horse, for he was not able to ride of himself. Yeah, so it's like, okay. And they took with him 10 horsemen and 10 footmen, and went to the children of Israel to Goshen. And when they had come to the border of Egypt, the king's horse passed into a narrow place, elevated in the hollow part of the vineyard, fenced on both sides, and the low plain country being on the other side. And the horses ran rapidly in that place, and pressed each other, and the horses pressed the king's horse. And the king's horse fell into the low plain, whilst the king was riding upon it. And when he fell, the chariot turned over the king's face, and the horse lay upon the king, and the king cried out, for his flesh was very sore. And the flesh of the king was torn from him, and his bones were broken, and he could not ride, for this thing was from the Lord to him. For the Lord had heard the cries of his people, the children of Israel, and their affliction. And his servants carried him upon their shoulders, a little at a time, and they brought him back to Egypt. And the horsemen who were with him came also back to Egypt, and they placed him in his bed, and the king knew that his end was come to die. So Aperanith, the queen, his wife, came and cried before the king. The king wept a great weeping with her. And all his nobles and servants came on that day, and saw the king in that affliction, and wept great weeping with him. And the princes of the king and all his counselors advised the king to cause one to reign in his stead in that land, whomsoever he should choose from his sons. And the king had 3 sons and 2 daughters, which Aperanith, the queen, his wife, had borne to him, besides the king's children of concubines. And these were their names: the firstborn, Othri; the second, Adikam; and the third, Morion; and their sisters, the name of the elder Bathia, and of the other Akuzi; and Othri, the firstborn of the king. And the other Akuzi. Okay, so those are the sons and sisters. So Othri, Adikam, and Morion were the brothers, and their sisters were Bathia and Akuzi. And Bathia was the one who took Moses out. Othri, the firstborn of the king, was an idiot, precipitate and hurried in his words. So I'm thinking some sort of general disorder, mental disorder. And so, but not absolutely severe. But Adikam was a cunning and a wise man, and knowing in all the wisdom of Egypt, but of unseemly aspect, thick in flesh and very short in stature. So he was fat and short, and his height was 1 cubit. Wait, isn't a cubit from your elbow to your fingertip? Am I remembering this right? That's pretty crazy. What is the measurement of a cubit? Linear measurement based on the length of the forearm from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. Yep. So, okay. So they're basically saying that the first son had mental deficiencies. And Adikam, who was the second, was that tall. So he would have been a little person, however you want to say, midget, dwarf, whatever you find is acceptable, because who knows what will be acceptable when you watch this. Anyway, and then, okay, so Othri and Adikam, interesting. And when the king saw Adikam, his son, intelligent and wise in all things, the king resolved that he should be the king in his stead after his death. And he took for him a wife, Gedudah, daughter of Abilot, and he was 10 years old, and she bare unto him 4 sons. Again, the Book of Jasher is one that loves to embellish. I'm not going to shy away from that. So I doubt he was really that short. So, okay. And he afterward went and took 3 wives and begat 8 sons and 3 daughters. And the disorder greatly prevailed over the king, and his flesh sank like the flesh of a carcass cast upon the field. I think it was supposed to be field. They misspelled it and have F, fleld. So field in summertime, bearing the heat of the sun. So he was probably rotting from within, frankly. And having sepsis or something. Eesh. And when the king saw that his sickness had greatly strengthened itself over him, he ordered his son Adikam to be brought to him. And they made him king over the land in his place. And at the end of 3 years the king died in shame, disgraced, disgust, and his servants carried him, buried him in the sepulchre of the kings of Egypt, in Zoan Mizraim. But they embalmed him not, as was usual with kings, for his flesh was putrid, and they could not approach to embalm him on account of the stench. So they buried him in haste. For this evil was from the Lord to him, for the Lord had requited him evil for the evil which in his days he had done to Israel. And he died with terror and shame, and his son Adikam reigned in his stead. Interesting. So basically the book is making fun of Pharaoh, that Pharaoh, as much as possible. In the 206th year of Israel going down to Egypt did Adikam reign over Egypt, but he continued not so long in his reign over Egypt as his fathers had continued their reigns. For Melol, his father, reigned 94 years in Egypt, but he was 10 years sick and died, for he had been wicked before the Lord. And all the Egyptians called the name of Adikam Pharaoh, like the name of his father, as was the custom to do in Egypt. And all the wise men of Pharaoh called the name of Adikam Ahuz, for short is called Ahuz in the Egyptian language. So Adikam the short, basically. Adikam Ahuz. And Anakim was exceedingly ugly, and he was a cubit and a span, which he was a cubit and a span, and had a great beard which reached the soles of his feet. What? Okay. Now, look, I've read very little about the medical condition of dwarfism, but this reminds me of, okay, so where do I get this from? Michael Crichton had a book, The 13th Warrior, and he talked about how people with dwarfism have different status as their culture. Depending on the culture, there's different statuses. They're somewhat mythological. Sometimes they're looked down on, and you know what? Okay, that's kind of a pun. I'll own it. I didn't intend it, but I'll own it. But there are plenty of other times where they're thought of as mythical and kind of cool and exotic and special. So some societies don't hold them in high regard. Others do hold them in high regard, depending on what civilization you're in and the mythology behind them. And what is the measurement of a span? Okay, so that's from the thumb to the finger. Tip of the thumb to the tip of the little finger. It's historically equivalent to half a cubit. Okay. Really? Because if it's the tip of the forefinger, I figured that would be... Okay. Wait a minute. Wait. Let me see here. Sorry, I'm trying to get this, so... Well, I guess so. Yeah, it's not very good, but you're just using body part reference for measurement anyway. So about half a cubit makes sense. So I'm trying to figure this out because they said he was just a cubit before. So now he's talking about he's a cubit and a span, and the beard went to his feet. Which, I mean, if he really was that small, then I guess that's... Do people with dwarfism have beards that can reach their feet? Question mark. Sorry, because to me this sounds like stuff that would be from fairy tales. But at the same time, everyone that I've seen with dwarf... Well, no, not everyone. No, it's just telling me about the... Why do dwarves have beards? Okay, so there's... Short stature, impressive beards. Tolkien has the trope. All these things have a trope. So I guess it comes from depending on which culture you're in, because Native Americans didn't really have beards. And so you don't see anyone that they talk about that have that condition, that they're a little person, or, again, I'm dancing around terminology because I don't know what's acceptable. So, but essentially the idea is that if you're in a culture where you're furry like me, that if I had a child with dwarfism, that sure, he might be able to have a beard that actually reaches the ground, because a regular beard for me would go to my chest, but for him, he's already of small stature, so it'll reach the ground. Makes sense to me. So it's just interesting, because I never thought of it being in one area but not another. So, cool, okay. So they're, again, making very much fun of this pharaoh because of him reigning over the people of Israel. All right. So, and Anakim was exceedingly ugly, and he was a cubit and a span, and he had a great beard which reached the soles of his feet. And the Pharaoh sat upon his father's throne to reign over Egypt, and he conducted the government of Egypt in his wisdom. Wisdom doesn't matter about stature. And whilst he reigned, he exceeded his father, and all the preceding kings in wickedness. And he increased his yoke over the children of Israel. And he went with his servants to Goshen, to the children of Israel. And he strengthened the labor over them. And he said unto them, Complete your work each day's task, and let not your hand slacken from our work, for from this day forward as you did in the days of my father. And he placed officers over them from amongst the children of Israel, and over these officers he placed taskmasters from amongst his servants. And he placed over them a measure of bricks for them to do according to that number day by day. And he turned back and went to Egypt. So, okay, I always think of the land of Goshen as the Nile Delta, but I've never confirmed that. What is the land of Goshen? Region in Egypt allotted, yes. Located in the eastern Nile Delta, likely in the Wadi Tumilat area, or near Avaris, served as a settlement for Jacob's family and remained their home until the Exodus. Described as the best part of Egypt. Land was fertile, yeah, and ideal for livestock and agriculture. So, do I have a map? Sorry, these are little detailed. Okay, I'm getting land of Goshen. Well, that's a sensationalist map. Is that the Sinai Peninsula? Goshen? Land of Goshen is the delta. Goshen is kind of Sinai Peninsula? Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. This is a pretty good one. You have Alexandria on the left of the Nile Delta, Baal-Zephon, Zoan, Tahaphanes, Pithom, Succoth, Migdal, Ramesses, and On are on the eastern side. So that's a pretty good way to look at it. Or as this one has, this is just showing an Exodus route. They have Goshen on the right-hand side of the Nile, Delta Nile, or Nile, the Nile Delta. Okay. Sorry. It is in the Nile Delta. It's just the eastern side. Okay. I find that interesting. All right. I went back to Egypt, and at the time the taskmasters of Pharaoh ordered the officers of the children of Israel according to the command of Pharaoh, saying, Thus says Pharaoh, do your work each day and finish your task, and observe the daily measure of bricks. Diminish not anything. And it shall come to pass that if you are deficient in your daily bricks, I will put your young children in their stead. So again, that's the threat from before. And the taskmasters of Egypt did so in those days as Pharaoh had ordered them. And whenever any deficiency was found in the children of Israel's measure of their daily bricks, the taskmasters of Pharaoh would go to the wives and children of Israel and take the infants of Israel to the number of bricks deficient, and they would take them by force from their mothers' laps and put them in the buildings instead of the bricks. So again, I figure that they're basically using them as mortar. And whilst their father and mothers were crying over them and weeping, when they heard the weeping voices of their infants in the wall of the building. So they're alive? They're just being sealed up in there? And the taskmasters prevailed over Israel, that the Israelites should place their children in the building, so that a man placed his son in the wall and put mortar over him. And whilst his eyes wept over him, and his tears ran down upon his child. And the taskmasters of Egypt did so to the babes of Israel for many days, and no one pitied or had compassion over the babes of the children of Israel. And the number of all the children killed in the building was 270, some whom they had built upon instead of the bricks which had been left deficient by their fathers, and some whom they had drawn out dead from the building. And the labor imposed upon the children of Israel in the days of Adikam exceeded in hardship that which they performed in the days of his father. And the children of Israel sighed every day on account of their heavy work, for they had said to themselves, Behold, when Pharaoh shall die, his son will rise up and lighten our work. But they increased the latter work more than the former, And the children of Israel sighed at this, and their cry ascended unto God on account of their labor. And God heard the voice of the children of Israel in their cry in those days, and God remembered to them his covenant which he had made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And God saw the burden of the children of Israel and their heavy work in those days, and determined to deliver them. And Moses the son of Amram was still confined in the dungeon in those days, in the house of Reuel in the Midianite. And Zipporah, the daughter of Reuel, did support him with food and secretly day by day. And Moses was confined in the dungeon in the house of Reuel for 10 years. And at the end of 10 years, which was the first year of the reign of Pharaoh over the king of Egypt in the place of his father, Zipporah said to her father, Reuel, no person inquires or seeks after the Hebrew man, whom thou didst bind in prison now 10 years. Now therefore, if it seem good in thy sight, let us send and see whether he is living or dead. But her father knew not that she had supported him. And Reuel, her father, answered and said to her, Has ever such a thing happened, that a man should be shut up for a prison without food for 10 years, and that he should live? And Zipporah answered her father, saying, Surely thou hast heard that God of the Hebrews is great and awful, and does wonders for them at all times. And he it was who delivered Abraham from Ur. Footnote, means also fire, and this alludes, according to the story in this book, to the oven in which Abraham was put. But it could also be wordplay. So, interesting. That helps clarify some stuff. Ur of the Chaldeans, and Isaac from the sword of his father, and Jacob from the angel of the Lord, who wrestled with him at the ford of Jabbok. And also, this man, he has done many things. He delivered him from the river in Egypt, and from the sword of Pharaoh, and from the children of Cush, and so also can he deliver him from famine, and make him live. And the thing seemed good in the sight of Reuel, and he did according to the word of his daughter, and sent to the dungeon to ascertain what became of Moses. And he saw, and behold, the man Moses was living in the dungeon, standing upon his feet, praising and praying to God of his ancestors. And Reuel commanded Moses to be brought out of the dungeon. So they shaved him and changed his prison garments, and ate bread. And afterward Moses went into the garden of Reuel, which was behind the house, and there prayed to the Lord God, his God, who had done mighty wonders for him. And it was whilst he prayed, he looked opposite to him, and behold, a sapphire stick was placed in the ground, which was planted in the midst of the garden. That sounds very similar to talking about the Garden of Eden. And he approached the stick, and he looked, and he beheld the name of the Lord God of hosts was engraved thereon, written and developed upon the stick. And he read it, and stretched forth his hand, and he plucked it like a forest tree from the thicket. And the stick was in his hand. So a sapphire stick. So does that mean real gems, or does that mean that it was just blue? Why would it be a blue stick? But okay. And this is the stick which all the works of our God were performed after he had created the heaven and the earth. What? And this is the stick with which the works of our God were performed after he had created the heavens and earth, and all the host of them, seas, rivers, and all their fishes. When God had driven Adam from the Garden of Eden, he took the stick in his hand and went and tilled the ground from which he was taken. Something's fishy here. Something's really interesting here. And the stick came down to Noah and was given to Shem and his descendants, and it came unto the hand of Abraham, the Hebrew. When Abraham had given it, he had to his son Isaac, and also gave him this stick. And when Jacob had fled to Padan Aram, he took it into his hand, and when he returned to his father, he had not left it behind him. And when he went down to Egypt, he took it into his hand and gave it to Joseph, one portion above his brethren, for Jacob taken by force from his brother Esau. This is sounding like what would have been the garment of Adam and Eve, but now it's turned into a sapphire stick? What does it mean by sapphire? The color or the substance? This is getting very interesting. And after the death of Joseph, the nobles of Egypt came into the house of Joseph, and the stick came into the hand of Reuel the Midianite. And when he went out of Egypt, he took it in his hand and planted it in his garden. And all the mighty men of the Kenites tried to pluck it when they endeavored to get Zipporah, his daughter, but they were unsuccessful. So that stick remained planted in the garden of Reuel until he came who had a right to it, and took it. And when Reuel saw the stick in the hand of Moses, he wondered at it, and he gave him his daughter Zipporah for wife. Okay, I'm stopping here. But wait. What is this? I am way fascinated by this stick idea, and I suspect this is going to be the staff that Moses, I'm presuming, because we haven't gotten to that chapter yet. Like, they resolved my question from last time, which was, well, how did they dethrone Moses? Well, when you don't take the wife of the former king to be your wife, and then her son grows up, yeah, that made sense. That worked. I'm presuming that this sapphire staff is why sapphire? Okay, and I can't decide if it's the color or the substance. Because to me, a crystal shaft that is, if I understand right, if you leave certain gemstones in the sun, they lose their color. And so I'm wondering if that would be the same with this sapphire. And shoot, now I'm going to have to look up a bunch of things about the symbolic nature of sapphire to Israelites of old, because it could just be the color. And since he planted the staff in his garden, or the stick, how do you plow with a stick? Okay, because there's tons of symbolism behind this that I'm seeing. Staffs, scepters, sticks, wands, these things denote authority. This is why wizards have staffs and wands. They're generally the same type of symbol, that of power, just one's longer and one's shorter. But they are of the similar type of thing. It's you could think of it as, if you're thinking of wizards and stuff, then you're thinking of, gaining power from the natural world, etc. But on the other hand, if you're thinking of royalty, the staff and the scepter are things that you rule with. You can bonk people on the head to get things done. Okay, that's a real crass way of putting it, but it's the idea of authority. And so the tale of how it went from the Garden of Eden into Moses' hands follows the exact same path of the garment of Adam and Eve up to the point where Joseph's garment would have been torn, but it would have been in his hand. So it sounds like that this staff was also with it. So it seems like some sort of authoritative power. Now, is this staff supposed to mean, Abraham paid tithes, and that was likely to son of Noah. And, okay, because I'm trying to figure out, so Jethro gets a hold of this, or this is really weird about how he was in prison, but I feel that's allegorical, because if Joseph was supposed to be 10 years in prison, but instead got 12 years because he relied on someone telling Pharaoh, and so it was delayed further for 12 years. Basically I suspect the idea rabbinically is to say, through imperfection, you are brought into subjugation, and through perfection, you are delivered from subjugation. because Moses spent his 10 years in prison instead of having it extended by relying on someone other than the Lord. Obviously, he was relying on food from Zipporah, but, I mean, you don't see any mention in there specifically. So I guess that's kind of the way it would lean. Yet at the same time, this staff thing is very interesting. Does it represent religious power, so priesthood power? Does it represent authority? Like, because remember, according to at least the Book of Jasher, it says that Judah would be the one to reign with kings, Levi would be the one to reign with priesthood, and Joseph would be the one with the birthright. And since the staff went through Joseph, this means that you have a Levite with the birthright. So, again, and the whole house of Judah being the one with kings, to me that's anachronistic because they hadn't figured out who was going to be king over Israel until David, because even Saul was of Benjamin. And so the great King David and then the kingdom of Judah came after. And so what I mean by anachronistic is it just seems to me like that division of Judah gets to rule with kings, Levi has the priesthood power, and Joseph has the birthright. Seems like it probably would have been put in there later. Like I said, the only fiery furnace that I know is after stories of Daniel and being in Babylon. So could be Jasher was revisiting the stories of old to sensationalize them and codify them and have them be updated to have more teaching along the line of what was supposed to be needed for the people of Israel at that time by those who were their leaders. But I don't know. I'm not that scholarly, so that's a wild supposition and guess. But this staff, though, that is interesting. It has to do with power and authority. And now I'm going to have to look up the sapphire stuff. So hopefully I have something for you at the beginning of next time. I would say that the big thing in your life should be to see how you can follow God in all his ways so that he can bless you in his time according to what is needed. And that way, you'll be prepared to receive whatever blessings and he has in store for you. So may God be with you always. We'll see you.